Happy holidays, friends! I have a really fun craft for you today. We're going to be making paper-mache mushrooms. They are so easy to make and they cost nearly nothing to make. They are such a great pop of color for the holidays and you can make them any time of year. So let's get started. And if you're joining me for the first time today, welcome. I'm Laura Beth Love and I'm an artist and author, and I love to create fun, creative craft projects and share them with you. Now, to start our project, the first thing we're going to need to do is to create our mushroom-shaped base. And we're going to do that with newspaper or magazine pages and masking tape. So those are the first two materials you're going to need. Here I pulled some circulars out of the newspaper, and these pages are a little bit stiffer than regular newspaper pages because they're kind of glossy. And sometimes I start with those, and I like to use those for my base and use the regular, more porous newspaper for actually applying the paper mache. So to get started, I'm going to find some that are square shaped, and if not, I will cut them down or tear them down so they're relatively square. And the first thing I'll do is I will fold in the four corners and make it a smaller shape. Now, we don't want points on the corners of our mushroom cap, so I'm going to use my fingers and go around, and I'm going to just crumple the edges of our mushroom cap of our newspaper into kind of a circular shape. And you can see I'm just squishing it with my fingers and pressing down on it, and then I'm going to grab some masking tape. And what we're going to do first, we're just going to put a couple pieces down on the underside. That's the underside. And I'm just trying to secure the crumpled edges down so that it's not opening up while we work with it. And what we're going to do is we're going to basically cover the entire mushroom cap with masking tape. And once I have those edges secured down, I can go around and just put piece after piece down, and you'll see as I push those like pointy edges around the edges of the circle, I'm going to try to push those in and tape them down. And you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. These are handmade, and everything in nature, you know, there's differences, and they're not all exactly circular, and you know, some can be a little lumpy, and that's fine, and that's what makes them, you know, unique and individual. So now I'm going to put one end of the tape and I'm leaving it on the roll, and I'm just going to pull some down, and this just makes it go a little quicker. You know, I mean, sometimes the tape will get a little bit, you know, wrapped on itself and you just tear it off and start over. But it doesn't have to be neat and tidy. But what it does have to do is you have to cover all the newspaper print or the magazine print that you're using. Because when we put the paper mache on, the paper mache is wet. And we don't want it to make it like soggy inside. You don't want anything that's going to like keep moisture in there, or, you know, possibly get, you know, nasty or moldy. So we're going to cover every little spot we can where we see newspaper sticking out. And once I have it all covered, I'm going to inspect it. I'm going to press down on it, make sure the tape is down, you know, nice and tight. And here you can see I'm going to continually inspect it and look for, you know, the paper parts showing through, and then just piece after piece I'm going to be applying the masking tape. You need a nice sized roll of masking tape for this project. And you know, I can sit and watch a movie, or you know, watch Netflix or something at night, and I can make like 10 of these bases just like while I'm watching a show. They're easy to make, you know, there's no mess with it. It's just paper and tape. So, you know, work on those, get your mushroom cap completely covered, and then you're going to do the stem. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull out another piece of paper, and I'm going to fold it into like kind of a long rectangular shape, and I'm going to hold it underneath the mushroom cap to measure to see how long I want the stem. That's what I'm doing there. So I'm going to fold it up a little bit, and I'll crease it, and then I'm going to hold the cap up again, and that looks like a pretty nice length. So I'll start at one end, and I'm just going to roll it tightly. Not super duper tight, but you don't want it really loose either. So you're going to roll that up, and then we're going to secure that with some masking tape as well. We're going to do the same thing that we did with the top. We're going to cover our entire mushroom stem with masking tape. And I usually just pull a long piece out and go over one end, and then do the same thing on the other side, and then just kind of wrap it around while I turn it, which you'll see in a second. There's no rhyme or reason to it. There's no right way or wrong way. I just, after doing so many of them, you kind of have your own little way of doing things. So I'm just going to pull some out. I'm going to start at one end and just kind of keeping the tape on the roll, I'll just kind of wrap it around. Now, the mushroom stem does not have to be like super firm and very sturdy, because once we put the paper mache on and that dries, that's going to be pretty rock hard solid. So you want to just shape it with your fingers. Sometimes you might want to put a little bit more around the ends if it looks a little bit flimsy, but all we have to do now is attach our stem to the bottom side of our mushroom cap. And I pull a piece of tape out and I put one part of the tape on the stem, and then I just push it down to the bottom side of the mushroom cap. That's the part that we, crumpled in all the edges and taped it down. And, your top will be a little bit smoother. You can take more newspaper if you like underneath that tape, and you can build it up so the mushroom cap is like puffy or pointy. And you'll see later on that I do a couple like that as well. So you can see I'm just going to continually go around it, make sure the tape is all pressed down, make sure the stem is on there pretty well. If there's any little corners of tape sticking up on the mushroom cap or anywhere, I will do what I'm doing right here is I'll take another piece and I'll put it on there just to keep it nice and smooth. Now it's time to make our paper mache. You're going to need a medium-sized bowl, some all-purpose flour, a 1/2 cup measuring cup, and a tablespoon of salt. I use kosher salt because that's what I cook with. First, measure 1/2 cup of flour, put it into your bowl, measure a tablespoon of salt. I just measure in the palm of my hand. Put that in, that helps preserve our paper mache. And then you're going to use 1/2 cup of warm water. Now, I find that I usually need a little bit more than 1/2 cup. I'll start with 1/2 cup, take a fork, you're going to mix it all up really well, get all the lumps out, and you're going to see how thick or how thin it is. Now, it's too thick for me, so there I'm going to put about another tablespoon or two in. You go easy with the water, because if you make it too watery, you'll have to put more flour in, and you know how that's a never-ending cycle. So yeah, mix it up, make it like kind of like thin pancake batter is kind of how I describe it. I've made it already a little thicker. I don't like it any thinner than you see it right there, because it's too drippy then and it's going to take too long to dry. But make sure all the lumps are out, and then you're going to tear your newspaper into strips. Do not cut it with scissors. You won't get a nice finished product unless you tear it. They'll fit better together. You can do some fatter strips, you can do some, triangular, square, whatever. Sometimes I find myself just tearing them down like while I'm working, but you want to have a pile to start with. You don't want to have to be tearing paper while you're putting the mache on, because it's very sticky. So what I do to start is I'll throw a couple pieces in there, and you're going to just kind of dip them in. I run my fingers through it, and I, take all of the, I guess, thick gunk off of the paper, and I kind of like to have a couple finished like I am doing right there. Like I'll wet them and I'll set them on the side of my bowl. That way when I start applying it, I don't have to stop and like set the mushroom down and like dip another one and then wipe it off. Some people, have learned to use like a sponge to wipe it. I just use my fingers. You don't need to mess with anything more than necessary as far as, how I like to work. The least amount of things that are on my work table is probably for the better. So here I'm just going to start with the stem. And I dipped one and I wiped most of the mache off of it. So it is saturated and it's, sticky, but it's not dripping, okay? And I'm going to put one on, and then I'm going to overlap. So you always want to overlap the edge of your last piece. You don't want to have gaps. I mean, you're going to continually be applying piece after piece of newspaper dipped in the mache, and you're going to cover all of the masking tape. But it's easy to, see where you last stopped and then put another piece on over that. Now, do the bottom of the stem. At the very end when I have the whole thing covered, that's one of the parts I look at to make sure I got the bottom of the stem. Sometimes I like the bottom of the stem to look a little bit heavier, so I'll put a little bit extra, couple extra pieces on in the end. But As you can see here, I'm just going on piece after piece, and I start with the stem, then I do underneath the cap, around up the sides. And that's why it's nice to have some of those larger square shaped pieces or triangular shaped pieces, because they're nicer for filling in like some of the larger areas. And you just wrap them around, press it down. Now you can see as I'm applying this, a few of the strips, especially going over the edges of the mushroom cap, they're kind of like, they're going to gap a little bit. They're going to a little bit be kind of peeled away. Like, they're going to later on be all pressed down, because while you're working on it, like, it's hard to explain. You're working on top of like a plasticky masking tape with a wet product on old wet newspaper. So it's a little bit slippery, but you have to just kind of take your time and go around every single crease. Like every single individual piece of paper is going to be overlapping the next one. And it's a really meditative, relaxing kind of craft. Like I said, when I'm sitting watching a show, I can make like 9 or 10 of these mushrooms, like the bases, out of the paper and the masking tape. And then another day or the next day, I'll do the paper mache on all of them. Now, this is the old-fashioned flour and water and salt paper mache recipe. You can also make a paper mache recipe by using glue, white glue, like Elmer's glue, mixed with water. I guess some people put a little salt in there too. That also is another decent recipe, but I really like this recipe. I don't like to waste a whole bottle of glue when I can use half a cup of flour. It just doesn't make sense to me. So now you're going to air dry these for at least 24 hours or until they're completely dry and pretty rock solid. Now, I live in eastern Pennsylvania and it's been a little bit chilly and damp, so I popped mine into the oven on a cookie sheet on aluminum foil, about 125 degrees for at least an hour, but I check them every 10 minutes. I don't like leave the oven. You need to really watch them. I wouldn't turn it up any higher. And like I said, every 10 minutes or so, if you turn them so they don't stick to your foil, they'll dry a little bit quicker. But I'm just using regular acrylic craft paint here, and I have a flat brush. You can use round or flat. I like the flat brush to do this because it basically works, covers a lot of ground pretty quickly, and I sped that up. And what you're going to do is just cover the entire thing in white paint and then let it completely dry. And once it's dry, then we're ready to do our mushroom cap. Now here I'm going to use a round brush. I think it's about a size 8, I think. And what I like to do is I like to take some paint and I like to do around the edges of the mushroom cap first. And why I do that is so when you're looking at it, you have to have kind of like a steady, even line where the top color red of the mushroom meets the underneath of the mushroom cap where it's white, if that makes sense. And I find it's easy to do it this way. It's just the way I prefer to do it because I've done a bunch of them. So I'm going to take some paint and I'm going to go around the edges and I'm going to continually look at it like that and see where, you see how like there's like a white spot there? I'm going to cover that up. So that way, it's nice and even when you have it, hanging, whether you have it on your Christmas tree or you're just using it as a decoration. When you have it hanging and you look at it, it doesn't look kind of wonky. So take time going around your edges, try to make a nice smooth line. And once you reach the other side and you did, all the edges, then just do the whole mushroom cap top. And, this red paint is wonderful. I will put links below for all the products I used so that you can find them as well. And here I'm just finishing it off. You're going to need to brush in different directions because it is a rough surface. Mine aren't perfectly smooth. You saw me make it. It's pieces of newspaper, and there's plenty of bumps, and even though I didn't want pointy edges here and there, I still have them. And you're going to need to get the paint in all those little crevices. So go in different directions, one way and then the next. And I love this bright red. I also did a couple in I did a deep blue and a teal green, and you'll see those in the end. And once you have the entire mushroom cap painted, you're going to set that aside to dry. And it dries pretty quickly, I think within half an hour. And then we're going to move on to the next step. Once you've finished painting the red areas, inspect it, give it a good look over, and make sure you don't have any spots that you missed. And if you get any red on the white area, you can just take some white paint and go over that. And set that aside and let it completely dry. Then we're going to go back to our white acrylic paint and we're going to add our dotted details on the mushroom cap. And I have used a dotting tool to do this. That makes the spots all pretty much the same size, but I really like to use the paintbrush because you get more of a natural uneven edge on some of the spots, and I think that just makes it so much more charming. So here you can see the ones I've done, and once you're finished with all the dots, you're just going to let them dry again, and then all we have to do is put a hook in the top. And, you know, right now I'm using these little, it's like a screw with an eye on the other end. You can get them at a hardware store. They're pretty easy to use. You're going to have to kind of make a hole in the top center of the mushroom cap. You know, if you need like the end of a nail or a pin to get that hole started, that's a good idea. And then as you can see, I'm just screwing it right in very carefully because you have to push through like the hardness and the masking tape. So, you know, you want to be careful with it. You don't want to like crack your paper mache. It's not that it's super thick, but you know, that's basically the general idea. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some fishing line and pull about, I don't know, maybe 8 or so inches of that off, and I will cut a piece off. I will thread it through the eye on the hook, and I'll tie it in a double knot, and then I'll take my scissors and I will snip off any tail ends of the fishing wire the fishing line that's extra long, and then it's ready to hang, and that's all there is to it. Now, if you don't want to use the screws with the eyes on them, you can fashion your own little hook mechanism using some wire. I've done that, and you know, these are easier to use, you know, to put it plainly. You probably can use like a drop of glue if you have something like E6000, and you can put like a cord right on it probably before you paint it. If you try that out, make sure you leave me a comment below and let me know how that works for you. I really hope that you enjoyed this craft. It's super fun. They're so pretty and easy to make. And I'm going to give these as gifts to my family. I think I might put them on packages or something this holiday. So I hope you like this video. If you do, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, make sure to subscribe. Hit the little bell next to the subscribe button so that you get notified when I release a new video. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you have a great holiday. Again, I'll list all the materials below along with my links. You can check out my Pinterest and my Etsy shop and my Facebook page, and see you next time.